Hello and welcome to the Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast, where we listen to people's fairy encounters. But take heed, we're not talking about winged Tinkerbells here. These are real fairies, real encounters that took people like you and I by surprise. Stay a while and hear their stories. My name is Jo Hickey Hall, and I'm a folklore researcher. Welcome, listener, and thank you for being here. We're in midsummer here now in the UK, and everything is in full bloom. There's so much magic in the air at this time of year. In this episode, I'm chatting to Paolo Sammut, a paranormalist and magician. Paolo has had many supernatural experiences over the years, some of which we would recognise as fairy encounters. He chats to me about the time he was awoken by a very angry fairy, possibly a hobgoblin. On other occasions, he and other family members saw beings in the house that looked like other members of the family who were not present there at the time. These sound like doppelgangers, but in folklore, particularly Irish folklore, they are known as fetchers. I share some information about fetchers at the end of this episode from an Encyclopedia of Fairies by Catherine Briggs. Now, Paolo will be presenting an exclusive online talk on ghost hunting and the paranormal to the Curious crew on Patreon in the coming weeks. If you'd like to take part in that and our other events and get all the fortnightly bonus material, you can support the show for £3 a month and get access to our community there. Thank you very much to all my patrons who make it possible for me to spend time on this project. I really appreciate your support. This episode you're about to listen to is also available on the Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast YouTube channel as a video interview. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll be back at the end with some other fascinating encounters which sound similar to the type that Paolo experienced. Time to Really delighted to welcome Paolo Sammut.
Hello, hi, it's nice to speak to you.
Yeah, it's always good to speak to you. So you are a paranormalist and a magician.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's more as a ghost hunter than a fairy hunter, but everything tends to blend into one. And my approach is very much exploring the supernatural, exploring the paranormal, and really focus on experiences. I think that's as far as we can go nowadays. I don't think physics can explain some of the things people experience. And so I've not really focused on that angle, but more what can I experience? And that's really what gives us the best gift with the paranormal. When we look at this, we have experiences, we see the world, we see some of the beings in our world we share it with. And that gives us much more. You know, you meet a ghost, you're going to be more likely to believe in, say, life after death. That's a very sort of strengthening position to be in. So looking at all these things, seeing a big world, looking at how everything interacts, how everything wants to sort of speak to us, and we open our minds a little bit, open our eyes a little bit, it becomes very interesting. So I started off really looking at ghosts, and then it's got me going into woodlands quite a lot more. And then, you know, the beings we encounter there are not often ghosts. They're more likely to be called fairies, is maybe not the right word, woodland spirits, elementals. I don't know what the word is really. But certainly they're beings we can interact with and have experiences with, which, enrich our world. And, on top of that, it's been learning about magic over the last 30 years and the techniques of meditation, visualization, and so on, which helps to communicate. There's still so much to learn. There'll always be so much to learn. But, step by step, going through that, working it all out, and saying hello to the beings in our world.
Yeah, I mean, how did you get into all of this? What sparked your interest initially? As I don't know whether you were a child or older.
Always been interested, and I think a lot of it is I don't know whether I count as psychic. I've had enough psychic experiences. We'll talk about that in a bit. But growing up, there's always been things around me, and living in a house. My parents moved to a house in 1979, so I was about 8 or 9. And there was enough spooky stuff there which really just got me interested in the book. So I thought, what was that? What's going on? And from there, it's like, I've just never put it down. I've just been thinking, what is all this about? What was going on? And I'm trying to learn more about it.
That's quite interesting that you mentioned 9. I've been speaking to Ed Oliver, a fellow researcher, and he was mentioning to me about the little girl who had the experience with talking to a tree, and some other fairy beings that were present. And we talked about the number 9 in that episode, and he was talking about the number 9 and how a lot of encounters happen around that age. So it's interesting that you're mentioning that as well, because I think it is a time. It is quite a sort of
it's probably something
interesting age.
Because people talk about puberty and stuff, and this is earlier than that.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably different stages in life which are maybe sort of less meaningful in sort of a biological sense, but in terms of us establishing our identity, becoming beings, becoming sort of conscious people who look at things, look at the world, decide what we like, whether it's ghosts or racing cars. It's maybe the age where we start to establish ourselves. So maybe there's something like that there.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess with 9, it is a threshold, isn't it, before you get to double figures. Well, 9 is always about transformation.
Number of the moon as well. It's visionary states.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. So there's something in that. I'll have to think about that. So you mentioned the woods. Was that something that sort of developed? So I mean, a lot of people go for walks in the woods. I mean, you'll get families going for walks, you'll get runners, you'll get people using the woods for all sorts of different ways. And I think, I don't know about you, but the woods in the daytime as opposed to the woods at sort of twilight and darkness, it's a very different space. So how did your relationship develop there?
It's something which grows, and it's something. I mean, I've lived where I'm living for 12 years now. I'm moving away soon, and a couple of years ago, was walking through these woods where behind my house there's a garden, and then there's a short stretch of green, and then there's a river, and then around that you've literally got the M5 motorway just whizzing by 200 meters away. It's nothing, And we're going out for walks somewhere, and something. Again, it's one of the interesting things to say. Perhaps is sometimes you're picking up on things you're not even aware of until somebody else points them out. And about a couple of years ago, I was walking through there with a friend of mine, and she pointed out something really pokey here, isn't there? I'm embarrassed. I missed this, but it's you realise that yes, actually there is something really pokey here, and the first step then was we actually just walked through the wood, a bit of a meditation, say hello, and we're saying hello to the trees, you're saying hello. There's 2 crossroads just by it, and we walk down this path and it runs parallel to the M5. And just by where you come past my house, and I'm being very coy not to give my address away and so on, you get to the river, you get to this 4-way crossroad with a very strong mal tree. It's very tall, it's an acer. And then you go around a little bit, and then there's 2 small, slender trees which feel very female. There's a 3-way crossroad there. And you can feel different energies on there. Now, it's one of those things where I get very sort of subconscious about, because a lot of this stuff is not necessarily visual. It's sense, it's feeling, it's almost meditative how you're in a space and you see things or aware of things. Yeah. And then you walk all the way down to the motorway, and there's like another, just where the pathway ends and you got to the M5, there's like another crossroads, and it's a very sort of, almost like a darker space. Hard to say, all very subjective.
Yeah.
And it feels like things are rolling off the motorway and being caught and trapped in this little area. To the point where a friend of mine and myself, we did a road open ritual on the motorway a few months ago. And I just left the road open the powder, just said a few prayers, a few blessings, and just opened up the pathway so anything trapped there can move if it wants to. It's changed its feeling over the last couple of months to the point where there's no litter there. All these things are just clearing up a little bit. So it's quite nice and weird how it's doing that. And you walk back and you got the sense of the other trees, the other places. Now, what happened is the time when my friend pointed out, there's something here, and we sort of went back. We actually went back to my place and we did a ritual that evening, which was Crowley's headless ritual, hornless ritual. And there's various versions of that floating around the internet. And at the end of that, it's like we lit up the space around us. And the woodland spirits, whatever you want to call them, they literally walked up from that bit of forest through the garden, and they never entered the house, but you could feel them standing outside the back door, literally just reaching in. I mean, it was a July evening, the door was open, there's cats coming in and out and stuff, and to trap them in. And you could just feel that change in presence. You know, I know you're a skeptic, this doesn't sound very good, but you know, it's literally what happened there.
Yeah, you've got to go with it.
Yeah. And then running with it, you feel it. I mean, you know, the offerings you can make, I leave them cake, but I went through, I picked up all the litter in that area, and slowly that space, it's like it's regreening itself as I'm doing that. You know, the pick-up litter was a one-off thing, which I've done. I still pick up a bit of it walking through it. But since then, there's less litter being dropped, there's less cyclists running through it at breakneck speed, there's less drug dealers on the periphery of it, and so on. So it's slowly changing that a little bit of the space, and it's getting that little bit brighter as that attention is given to it. And I think that's the key thing, giving it attention.
Yeah. It's your relationship can really change the more you relate, and it is almost, you know, these kind of little pockets of it that they're like personalities of the forest. And you know, whether you might see them as maybe, I mean, we don't know, maybe certain beings attending those particular trees, those particular areas. You know, you think about the history of what happened there. I mean, maybe something, I don't know how close to the motorway it is, maybe something did come off the motorway at some point, you don't know. Or, you know, before the motorway, what was there, and do you think that's an old track?
I don't know. I mean, it could well be. I've not researched that. I tend to not research too much because I'm picking things up. And if I get good, I can research it later.
Yeah.
I mean, I more think with a motorway, it's literally a hollow. Just you know, you're talking feet from the motorway. I think you just roll off it, and maybe we can think of motorways like a river, and then you know, it's currents, it's tides, things move on it.
Yeah.
And with that, you know, things get caught in that little hollow, but certainly it's cleared up a lot now. It's very muddy sort of this time of year, but you know, going out there more and more as the season improves, and you know, being very aware of how it feels, which is the key thing, really. It's all I have, you know.
Yeah. No, it's great. I think that's, you know, this time of year, being able to step back into those spaces again, and you know, those spaces themselves seem to greet you. I feel if you've been away for some time and you have that relationship, and then you know, reconnect with them again, it does feel like a welcoming, and yeah, it feels good. Just sort of starting to get back out into our garden here, and being so busy over the winter, and it was quite cold and various things going on. It just feels really nice to be able to get back out there again and have that relationship.
Yeah,
it's really important.
I mean, as I said, I'm moving soon, and it's like, you know, one of the recent things I've done is I've taken 3 coins, buried them in the crossroads, taken a bit of earth with me. So when I do move, it does come with me.
Yeah.
And there's a whole lot of magic associated with that, of how you just connect to a place and keep that connection present, even if you're, you know, 100 miles away from it.
Yeah. What's the significance with the 3 coins then? How is that to hold the space in some way?
It's a gift. I mean, the odd numbers are always nice. So it's a gift. It comes a little bit from voodoo and hoodoo, those traditions of taking the coins. And part of it is working with a book from a writer, Aidan Watcher, who's done some very good stuff on actually connecting to a place and making offerings and taking crossroads dirt. But so 3 coins is like almost like traditional, so it's the way to do it, if you like. And then with that, it's the gift of a place. It's the effort of getting the coins. And you know, I researched silver coins on the internet and try to make it as realistic as possible. It's not a sort of gift you give where, oh, these 3 pennies, which mean nothing nowadays, you can do. It's taking the effort and the time to do something meaningful, and then give that to the site, take a bit of dirt, and so the actual site, with meditation and feeling for permission, you bring the site with you.
Yeah.
So that's all there. It becomes an entanglement. It's a welcome entanglement.
Healing has helped me many times in my life when I'd reached a point where something needed to change. In 2005, I trained with Martin Brofman to learn the body mirror system of healing, which was life-changing for me. It's based on the idea that the parts of your body that don't work well reflect the parts of your life that don't work well, and about which you have tension in your consciousness. The understanding is that tension is stress, and stress causes symptoms. In a distance healing or in-person session, I move up the chakras, returning each one to wholeness using a colour map. During the process, I see images and situations, I hear words or receive impressions that tell me something about what caused the tension in that person's life. The feedback at the end of the session is a really big part of the healing. If you're interested in a chakra healing session, you can contact me at scarletofthefae@gmail.com. Yeah, could you even leave something of yourself there, or would that not be a good idea if you left?
Oh, you could do. I did it myself. I mean, it's, again, we're talking about folklore entities. You've got a very strong connection with yourself if you live in, say, I don't know, blood or hair or whatever. I probably wouldn't do that myself because, yeah, it's a stronger connection. Somebody's got that, it's got you, it can hold you. It's not necessarily a safe thing. Now, again, everything is circumstance dependent. And if there's an entity you want to work with and you want to make that commitment, that's fine. But that's different to leave it at a site where you don't know who's passing through. So I'd be a bit more coy about that.
I guess that's more for maybe if you have your own home and protection that you want to sort of place your own energy around it.
Exactly. Some things can be vampiric, not in the in the sort of Dracula sense, but in the sense that they're all drained, they'll pull things from you. So be very careful when you make that commitment. Not to say never do it, but know what you're doing if you're going to do it. It can be dangerous.
So you've had some interesting experiences as well. So we talked a lot about fairies, and maybe we can talk a bit in a moment about how you think they all sort of relate to ghosts and ideas of aliens. But you have actually yourself had a fairy experience, which I'm really keen to hear about, because I don't think I've spoken to you about this in detail. I know I sort of know about it, but not fully in detail before.
Which I think are definitely fairy experiences. One is a very blatant fairy experience. I'll tell you that one first, and then the other one I think is a fairy, but again we get into languages like definition, what do we mean, and all these things.
Yeah.
But the fairy experience was it was about 2002, 2003, and I just moved into a flat in St Albans, a ground floor flat. The house did have a river running underneath it. I found out later, and I was a couple of months into moving in, and it was a Saturday afternoon. I decided it was time to sort of pull up the old carpet in the bedroom, which is a bit damp in the corners, again suggesting there was something down there, which might be relevant, and take that to the tip just to get some flooring down the next day. So no problem. Saturday, cleared up the bedroom, emptied the room, rolled up all the carpet, got it in the car and got rid of it. Now that evening, I did go out for a couple of drinks, and literally it's in my diary still. I had 2 pints of old speckled head. That's all I had. Right? I got back. It wasn't even a late night. I got back about 10, I think. I read a bit and I went to bed. And I was woken up about 2 a.m. by something tapping me on the shoulder. And literally, it was a gnome. Pointy red hat, white beard, the works. And I'm, sitting up in bed at this point, thinking, "What? This is not possible." Bearing in mind, I've always been interested in this sort of thing. I've got the sort of mindset is I've got no issues with ghosts or whatever.
Yeah.
You don't expect to be woken up at 2 a.m. by a gnome. It doesn't happen, right?
Brilliant.
And he was chatting to me in I couldn't understand what he was saying. There were certainly words were being said in a very fast language. Yeah. And he was annoyed about something. Now, in retrospect, I assume I pulled up his home and was a bit annoyed. And if I knew then what I know now, I'd have made sort of, some recompense for that and done something. But I didn't know at the time. But he was sitting there chatting to me. I was sitting up in bed with very wide eyes, thinking, "What?" And subjectively, I don't know how long the experience took. At least 20 seconds. I was still awake, and he faded, and he never came back. And to this day, I don't know what that was about. And, he's probably on Gnomecast somewhere telling a similar story.
Yeah.
I could write again and say, what was all that about? But yeah, it's just, it's unbelievable. It's just, it was there,
Yeah. So it's not in meditation. It was, full kind of eyes open. He's just appearing right in front of you.
Eyes open. I mean, he woke me up. So certainly I started off being in a sleep state. He woke me up, but I was sitting up in bed. I was looking in, and after it all happened, I actually got up and did things to do when you wake up, you go to the bathroom and all those bits and pieces. So certainly the end of the experience, there was no break in the experience and then me doing other stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like, I don't know what it was about. It's just, he was there.
What did his expression look like?
Oh, hard to recall completely. More from the way he was gesturing and literally tapping me like that and chatting in a language I didn't understand. It was too fast to understand. Just angry, irritated, very annoyed. As to facial expressions, I really can't recall. I don't know. Just annoyed,
Yeah. That is really great. Yeah. The tone, do you remember the tone of his voice or anything like that?
Again, it was a chattering sound, and it was really high pitched, and it's very much like it was. I mean, certainly it wasn't in a language. It wasn't in English. I don't do languages very well anyway. But it was like talking faster than normal, a lot faster than normal, to the point where it's so fast. When a tape recorder and we speed it up, and it's like it gets very high pitched. It was very much like that.
Yeah.
But again, it sounded irritable. It sounded very annoyed.
Yeah, I can imagine it as you're describing it. I can very much imagine. Reminds me of also, I don't know if you were ever into the Faraway Tree.
No, I don't know
that. Okay, so it's Enid Blyton, and there was the angry pixie that kept getting annoyed by various shenanigans that were going on in the Faraway Tree in the Enchanted Wood, and he would always come out and sort of start shouting at people.
Yeah, this is a temper.
Yeah, after that happened, then how long did you stay in the house afterwards?
That was right at the beginning, and I was there for about 5-6 years.
Oh, really?
There was no other connection with anything then, which I can relate to this. Now, at the time, I was doing quite a lot of ghost hunting and so on. And so there was the odd paranormal experience. I'd always had, sleep paralysis with, the entity, hallucination, incursions, whatever they actually are. All those things were happening anyway, but they were happening before. So I don't want to link it to that.
Yeah.
The only other thing is I got together with what's now an ex at the time, just a few months after that. And she was a very natural exorcist. She could repel things just by her presence, And there was, one evening where she spent the night in hospital, so I was alone in the flat again for the first time in a few months. And something sparked the cat off, and that's, maybe it's nothing. But, the cat who normally sat on the bed, she just panicked for no reason, as cats do sometimes anyway, and was hiding behind the TV. Now, that's not really a characteristic response for her, so maybe something stirred up again. I don't know. There's nothing I can really say was connected to that experience.
No.
I don't think I knew enough about clearing attachments and stuff at the time to know what was what and what was picking up, to actually tie it to this experience or not.
And what did you do with the floor in the bedroom afterwards? So you took up the carpet?
The old carpet and underlayment to the tip. That was on the Saturday before the experience.
Yeah.
And it was just home-based laminate, I think it was, I put down at the time.
Okay. Well, he must have just been, gave that his blessing somehow, and he was fine with that.
I don't know what happened. I would like to make amends. I don't have any connection to do that. It's too late now.
Yeah. Was it an old house?
Probably 1920s, 1930s.
Okay.
the address is somewhere written down. I can probably find out and dig that information up.
Yeah, interesting. And then, so the other experience you had, anyway, you tell the story because it's...
Yeah, I mean, that one happened again a lot earlier. I was about 9. Now, I've got to be careful here not to reveal the location. But my parents moved to a house in Lincolnshire, which has got a lot of history. It's about 400 years old, back in 1979. So I was 8 or 9. And for the first 6 months there, I was always seeing what looked like members of my family. Now, at the time, it was my mum, my dad, my older brother, myself, my younger sister, and my younger brother living there. So it was a fairly big family. And always seeing somebody moving out of the corner of my eye from one room to another, even though I knew that person was at work or definitely out of the house or somewhere else and so on. That happened for about 6 months. Really, it was a very strong, vivid experience every single time. You're seeing somebody as they walk past you, And I didn't know what it was. And again, it's like it was that person. It wasn't something taking its form. It was that person. That's what it looked like, at least. And it sort of died down after 6 months, 7 months, whatever it was. I wasn't keeping diaries when I was 9 or 10, however old I was. And it died back a lot. There was other experiences in the house too. Again, it's things where you sort of, when you go to bed at night and it's like, you're aware when everybody else has gone to bed, even if you've not seen that, you hear your parents go up, all those sort of things. But then you start hearing sounds like chairs scraping on the downstairs floor, all those little things. So there was something going on in that house. I'm not quite sure what it was still. My mum has left me with strict instructions, do not stir it up, and I respect that for obvious reasons. And it died off a little bit after the first couple of months. And then it's just a few odd experiences just over the years. Now, the three most prominent ones actually, is about 3 years later. So I was about 12. I was at home with my younger brother, and he was born in that house, so he'd come along after we moved in. And we were just playing, whatever we were doing. And I saw my niece, who was at the time living with us, standing next to me. Now, my niece was actually on a shopping trip in Boston, 20 miles away at the time. So it wasn't her, but something was taking her form.
Yeah.
And then my brother said to me, "Did you just see Jenny standing there?" So whatever happened, we both had the same hallucination at the same time. And that one, I didn't cue him. I saw her. And then he said to me, "Did you see her?"
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, that's interesting. We described then, but once that ice is broken, we described that she's wearing my little yellow dress she had when she was 4, whatever she was, and so on. So, yeah, it's one of those moments where you become invincible, because it's like, there's no way I hallucinated that if somebody else is saying the same thing. So it's that doorway into a bigger world. Yeah, physics can't explain that. That's interesting. So
is it kind of like the shape of them, or how clear are they? Can you see their face? Can you see their features?
I mean, it was a flash, so you really got a second. But it was her. It was, I can't tell you the expression. No. You didn't get the time to get that sort of level of detail. But she was standing there, and we described the clothes, we described her just looking there. And all I can think of is we're both children, we're both playing. Maybe something there was attracted to us playing and wanted to take part, So it was just really good, And then, you sort of go through that, and that was all happening. And then, years later, again, it's not diaries. I can only guess at the year, but I would have been about 18. And it was one of the summers out of university. So I was just, I've always had sleep catalepsy, I've always had sleep paralysis. Sometimes I experience or hallucinate entities around me. We can talk about all that. A lot of that is understood by psychology. There's buckets of stuff to talk about on that. But I was like, home that summer, and I woke up. I was in my cataleptic paralyzed state. What I would describe as a shadow person walked into the room, and it held its hand over my forehead like that. Not particularly threatening gesture,
Yeah.
But it is when you wake up paralysed, though. So, that was probably the most tangible, what was that type of experience, yeah? Even at 18, you scream. And then something my dad told me a few weeks after that is my mum had an experience about the same time. Mm. And again, it's my parents always kept the landing lights on because some of my brothers and sisters were younger, so they could always see a bit of light at night and so on. Yeah. Yeah. And my dad was asleep. Mum had her bedroom door opened, and she was awake at night reading, and she saw something move walk through the landing. And she thought it was one of us at first, because we were there. But when she described it as having literally a just completely blank expressionless face, sorry, not expressionless, a blank face, it was all smooth. And she was trying to wake up Dad, and Dad wasn't waking up. And the only thing she has to say on that is that the impression she got, which was not supposed to have seen it.
Okay.
So I think, and this is pure on my part, what she saw was what maybe we were seeing in the house earlier on, but she saw it in its natural form, not in its taking somebody else's form. Mm. I don't know. It's a very old house. It's very creepy. It's if I ever get a chance to investigate it, it'll be after we've all moved away and left it alone for a bit, because it'll probably stir it up and make it worse.
Are they still there?
My mum is still there. My dad passed away in 2005. My mum and my younger brother still living there. And literally, it's a house in the middle of a field in Lincolnshire. I'm not going to say more than that. But it's a strange place, and the location has got history.
It definitely sounds like that kind of place sparked your interest in doing ghost hunts.
Quite possibly. Maybe. I mean, my interest, it certainly started in that house when I was 9. Before that, I don't really recall much more earlier than that. And again, it's possibly layered. So I think certainly what I've just described, I would call something more akin to a fairy. Again, language, very, very dodgy.
Yeah. I was going to say, I've heard of fetches. Have you heard of something called a fetch?
I'm trying to think. There is some folklore of fairies which take forms as well.
That's right. Yeah,
that take. I can't recall offhand. Yeah. But there's stuff there where it becomes house fairies are like brownies, for example, unknown. And this one didn't really tidying up. I can kind of see that. It was just there. But again, I think it's location. The whole place is spooky anyway. I mean, and some stuff you read into it. If you sort of drive down, there's like a half-mile long drive down from the road to the house, and there's a willow tree in the field to the next, and it looks, when you're 9, you notice these things. It looks like an old man sitting down watching the house. Yeah, you don't need that when you're growing up, really.
Well, no, I suppose not. That is terrifying, but so it's got a pokey character to it.
It's just like bats in the attic. It's a strange place. It's a house which does need researching, but now is not the time. I'm not going to stir up my mum's house. That's not going to happen.
No, she's warned you off it.
It'll be because that's not going to happen. Yeah.
Does she know what the sorts of things that you're doing with your ghost hunts?
She knows the stuff. She knows pretty much everything. I know, again, less connected. It's like she told me fairly recently. My dad had similar seeing forms which are like family members moving from the house, which he never told me at the time. And he said, "I'll tell you all this stuff," before he passed. And then, of course, we never got to hear stories firsthand. I wasn't the only person to pick things up in that house, but it probably did start me off a little bit and got me interested. And from there, moved to London, joined the Ghost Club, went to investigations, and just got more and more involved from there. Really.
Oh, great! Yeah, you seem to have a really nice close ties to London. So I hadn't realised that you'd lived there for quite so long. So you're planning to move back there, aren't you? Do you think you're going to sort of start running some interesting?
I certainly hope so. I run a group. Well, I'm starting a group that's still very new. The Secret Lines of London, which looks into all that.
It's a brilliant group on Facebook.
It's on Facebook. It's on Twitter. And it's a reference for Secret Lines, it's a reference to the goddess Ellen in other ways, who very much the ley lines and paths moving out. And Ellen is a goddess of London, and she's linked to Old King Cole. There's again lots of folklore we can dig into on that. A guy, trying to get dates now, early 20th century, I think, Harold Bailey wrote some books on folklore which looks into all of it. And he didn't put any of the sources down, unfortunately. So we don't quite know where he got this information from, but he talks about all these things and how it gets to London, and London reaches out to everywhere. So we can draw a line, say, from London to Stonehenge. We can draw a line, say, from London to, Haunted Woods in Somerset, down the road from me and so on, or to Bristol, and all these places. And each of these are important points where folklore congregates. And so, yes, two things I want to do is get a group together of actually do a bit of psychic development, a bit of psychic protection, and know how to investigate these things from a paranormal psychic approach without equipment. Keep that as low key as possible. I very much think that when you're investigating, you don't want technology. You're using the left side of the brain. You're busy looking at readouts, looking at things like that. You're not busy feeling.
Yeah.
So let's keep it as low key as possible.
Yeah.
And know how to protect a little bit, know how not to pick up attachments, because I can tell you how to pick up attachments, I can tell you to get rid of attachments now. But then also look at things from the medical perspective and seeing where we're going with all these things, because, it's more interesting. I'd rather have an experience than a readout what said, the EMF peaked at this point, suggesting something. So let's take that and try to do something a little bit different and, keep it with people who just want to keep low key about this stuff. I don't want media. I don't want too much of that. I just want to keep it, interested people wanting to run with it and see where it goes.
Yeah, I think I've never done anything like that, but I'm really fascinated, and I'd love to come along for sure. I think sort of like you say, remaining open seems the most sensible thing to do. I guess that's just kind of that's just what we like to do. So there are other people that, their bag is to come with the equipment and, start to sort of find ways to rationalize it in a way, through temperatures, through, spirit boxes and all these sorts of things. And that's what really gets them going. And that's great as well. But yeah, I think for me, it's just being open and sensing, and then being able to exchange afterwards what you felt, experienced in some way, noticed, or
that's it. There's space for both approaches, and maybe we can learn from each other in the future. But certainly, I'm having a lot more fun doing it this way, and that's really where I go with that, because it does give you the experience. And I think the key for me is actually to encounter things, and when you're in a haunted house, things are happening, and sometimes again it's what level those things are happening. So on one level, the pipes are banging, for example, when you're asking questions, and it's a plumbing thing. A physicist or a plumber will say pressure's dropping here.
It's a means, though. It's
and it's happening at the right time.
Yeah.
So you get meaningful information from it. So when you get yes/no answers, which then you can later check out and validate, it means that actually something's happening. And yes, pressure's dropping in the plumbing somewhere. Yes, I know that. But it's happening at the right time to actually give me an answer. And that's really interesting.
It's paying attention, isn't it? It's paying attention.
And it says a lot about our world and how these things work, because we just don't know still. How these things are all entangled into things. And it's my thoughts on this are very much that somehow the supernatural world, or whatever language you want to use, has a way to create order out of randomness. And so that's how you shuffle a tarot deck and you get a meaningful answer, or pipes are banging, or whatever. It's doing it because it can collapse that randomness at the right time. It's a mechanism. So, the research, I think, needs to go into things like this to see, why is it doing it? How is it doing it? I don't know, but it does it. I'm convinced of that.
Yeah, it's really true. I was thinking also about how all of these experiences, so with the kind of the fairy sorts of experiences and the ghost experiences, and even the experiences in the forest and connecting with those locations, how they tie in with alien and UFO experiences as well, because some people might enter a forest and sense something to do with alien or UFO presence. What's your take?
It's interesting, and I think it's related. And when we get to UFOs, I think there's a whole tangle of things to unpick. So some of it is probably, government black ops, exotic aircraft being tested secretly and whatever, right? And, and some of it is maybe real visitors from other worlds coming here. They're playing Star Trek in reverse and coming to see us.
Yeah.
Well, then some of it maybe is what we call fairies or entities. Maybe fairies come from space. We don't know, right? We associate with woodland. And I think what we have in our heads is we put things through a filter. So some of us who are maybe more magic oriented might see things in that traditional, very medieval fairy tale, fairies type thing. Other people from, say, a more sort of technical background might see things from a more sort of space traveller background. I don't know. I think a lot of it is overlapping because a lot of the experiences are the same. You get time loss. You get all the food taboos, which people like talks about. Yeah, you've got the going into the hill, going into the mound, going into the saucer type thing. All these commonalities, all that, and you get the weirdness of UFOs as well. I'm trying to think of the guy's name now. There's the account I love the most is this guy in Wisconsin was camping, and aliens turn up. They offer to trade him pancakes for water.
Oh yeah.
Joe Simmleton, that's his name, yeah. And it's like they have a pancake. There's like, I think, 3 pancakes, which were described as quite cardboardy and not very nice.
That is a mad one, isn't it? Yeah.
What's going on there?
Yeah.
And it's like, there's no reason to call him a liar. If you're going to make something up, why make a story like that up? You wouldn't do it, yeah. There's no reason to assume he's ill or has got mental health issues to make something up either. So, I buy the experience. Many of us in these fields have had their share of weird experiences, but I'm not going to say somebody else is a liar just because their weird experience is weirder than mine. We still have weird experiences. So.
That's so true, isn't it? Because even when we're speaking to people ourselves, and we've both had some really, unusual and fascinating experiences that a lot of people would find hard to swallow, really, which is fair enough. And then we think we're very open, but then when, occasionally you do hear other stories and you think, well, I'm really not sure about that. And for, some will be obviously for good reason, but a lot of them might simply be that's just, we've reached our threshold in what we feel is possible and, believable. I wonder how they get on in the world. It's hard enough for just anybody that's maybe seen a fairy or seen a UFO, which is, UFOs, of course, they're a bit more mainstream. Seeing a fairy hopefully is becoming known to be, not as rare as some people think, because there are plenty of accounts now. But
common as ghosts, I would say, or getting close to that.
Yeah.
It's our culture is fairly materialistic for the most part. So UFOs as space travellers is maybe more acceptable to consciousness than fairies. Maybe that's why we're seeing UFOs are becoming more popular nowadays, or they have been, and there's a lot of stuff going on there. But again, it's hard to unpick it with what also is going on with black ops and military stuff and so on, which we don't know about. We can speculate.
This is the thing. Although I have noticed, and I'm sure that I know that we've spoken about this on Patreon with the crew as well, but just so much more activity happening. I really noticed it. I was noticing it from sort of about October last year. Lots of things going on in the home. And have you been noticing that too?
I think so, yeah. I've been noticing it really for a couple of years now, since all the lockdowns over COVID have been happening. Best guess is we're living in a less enriched environment. So our brains are reaching out, trying to find more things to do. So whether it's us hallucinating things, which I don't think is the case, or whether actually we're picking up on more things because it's around us, we can't go out so much, and we couldn't go out so much when lockdowns were in full force. So we're becoming very aware of what's around us. And I do think that's been happening. There's been certainly peaks in dreaming, for example, as well.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
I mean, when I moved into this house, it was very flat and not active at all. It's a lot more active now. I'm moving out soon.
Yeah.
Before I move. I do think it's a case that people are more picking up on this, but also maybe consciously as well. I mean, with things like COVID, we've seen, examples that say people talking to the neighbours and saying, if you can't get your food, I'll go to the supermarket and get your food for you. I'll do your shopping and so on. So there's much more community, there's much more kindness out there. Yeah. And maybe that's also given us that back connectivity, which entangles us in the world a little bit. I mean, I don't know, but I would speculate on those lines, definitely.
See, this is the point that I was thinking about, is that because we were not able to physically visit each other, and of course we were using Zoom and phoning people and things like that, but we're really connecting at a heart level, actually, and through spirit as well. So you are experiencing your relationships with people at another level aside from the physical, and we've got a little bit more used to doing that. I think one example keeps coming to me at the moment is the way, so for myself, I've started working back in the office now, so and people have come and gone in that time, but basically when you're going in there, you're not sure whether you've met them in person before or on Zoom, but you already feel like you've met and you've got to know them. Now I think that that is an indication of us being able to sense each other's consciousness. I mean, people have different ideas about consciousness. I feel, some people would say your aura goes for 2 meters and that's kind of the end of it. I err on the side of thinking that your consciousness, your energy consciousness actually is infinite, and that it intermingles with everybody around the planet. So like you say, there's been much more connection, and that really does lift the vibration, if you like, of our planet, but also this sense that this interconnectedness, that we may not be physically meeting one another, but we sense each other and we really kind of get to know each other. People have made really strong friendships through this time on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram as well. In that same way, they may not have even seen each other's faces. It may literally be through writing to one another, but you really do get a sense of them. Perhaps that's just my own thing that my own tangent, but what do you think about that?
I think we're a lot more connected than we think. And I agree, auras go beyond 2 meters. Again, there's a mechanism maybe which that describes, and we can get into like an Eastern jargon of each little bit. But then we're reaching out more and more, and other things we have reinforce that. So, for example, Facebook. I love Facebook. As a home worker, I've been a home worker for about 5 years now. So it's my lifeline at work. I set some software up, what it's doing, and then I sit and have a quick look, see what's going on. And so I'm connected to people, all the time in that sense. And I think it does change us when we look at things and our responses to things. So, for example, the war in Ukraine, what's happened? There was a lot of outpours, a lot of cost. There's lots of issues about. I'm not going to go into the politics of it.
No.
But it's things like, say, photographs of people bringing their pets out of Ukraine. That's been unknown. We've never seen pictures of that from other war zones. So there's that actual humanity maybe is become a bit more aware, a bit more conscious, a bit more caring in other dimensions, like our pets, our things around us, which we haven't seen before. And I think all that is the expression of the connectedness, whether it's through Facebook or through a psychic tingling as to, this person is really nice. I don't know them yet, but yes, I want to be friends.
You just know,
The outpouring is not the sharing of memes and the expression of grief and horror, but it's the connectiveness, and it's for the caring for the people, the caring for the pets, and things which actually define us as living beings, so caring beings, which is far more important maybe than worrying about politics, which is its own thing. That's something different.
Yeah, I think that that's so true. There's that level, and and some people just don't want to look at that, and that's fine, I think. But what you can actually see instead, is okay, there's a lot of really awful things going on in the world, and that have been going on, and a lot of suffering before this time, in other places in the world. Of course, this is the West now that are sort of perhaps experiencing these kind of sufferings, thinking more of COVID actually, in these times. But what you have seen more and more in these times, and leading up to this time, in the decades leading up to it, is that although really awful things are happening in the world, that never before have you seen so many people wanting to help. You have, even with humanitarian disasters, humanitarian groups going out to disasters in the decades leading up to this, just giving their lives because they want to help. And you see people here in the situations that we've been in the last few years, where people are saying, I can't just not do anything, I need to do something physical to help, sometimes with little regard for their own safety as well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I saw today on Facebook, one Facebook friend who lives in Italy is driving up to the Polish border to actually just people back, and I'm sure these things happen all the time. Now maybe we're just more aware of it. Maybe I think we're also feeling it more. It's like, there's more, I'm a carnivore, but there's more of a move, say, to vegetarianism, to veganism, to be aware of the issues. So even if you have a burger, you're aware of what the burger is, all those things. And humanity is, I think, slowly becoming that much more sensitive. Yeah. And then that's when we make our choice, what do we want to become? And that's a big question for humanity, which, is a big question, I think. Yeah. Let's hope we will choose just kindness. That's what we can really do,
Yeah, absolutely. Oh. Yeah, thank you very much. And maybe everything that we're looking into is part and parcel of that. Maybe this is a coming together, and the community stretches out to these other realms, and that we are experiencing a period or, crossing a threshold to increase connectivity with those realms. And that I feel is a good thing.
I think it will. And again, it's like if you say, look at the name's gone. Give me a second. The famous book on fairies, the guy who died in the hill in Scotland.
Kirk.
Look, that's the one, yeah. Yeah. And it's like he described very much fairy communities under the earth and civilization, all those things there. Yeah. And there's similar accounts. So you find, say, in the Middle East, accounts of jinn, very similar, for example, yeah. But maybe it's not quite like that. And maybe, again, how we look after our countryside, our farmlands, our cities even. And I think you find fairies in cities as much as you find them in the countryside. We don't quite know how they live yet, how they enfold themselves in their environment. Like, we know that we have to go to work, we live in houses, and we go to a supermarket to get food and all the things we do. They don't necessarily live like that. And so as we change our world, we're changing their world for them too. Mm. And maybe that's why there's maybe why it's actually, with the change of humanity becoming a bit more sensitive, maybe that's why there's more encounters coming up, because we're actually meshing better with these other inhabitants of our world.
Mm. Yeah, just like, I suppose, I was thinking about your carpet again, and the fairy, whatever you did, sort of moving in there had an effect on him. And I just,
exactly.
There can be good and bad effects. And but the point is that we're open to communicate, I think.
And this house was living probably in some slightly damp corner in the room, so you can't describe it as a house as we would understand it, and not living in the world as we understand it, perhaps, yeah? But certainly as a presence, and I do think I stirred up his home, whatever it was, yeah, but we can't conceptualise how that gnome lived. It's just not, we don't have that. So it's different worlds there, we can't mesh them together yet to understand it. I think the more we think about that, the more we might find new ways to learn about them, more tools to actually, not so much investigate them, that becomes a bit too colonial, to communicate with them, and then to actually start building relationships again.
Yes.
We sometimes need to step back and maybe think in the past we knew a lot more. Where did all the rules come from to talk to the Fae? All the things we're not supposed to, like fan cam, all those bits and pieces.
Quite right.
Better communication they had.
Yeah.
And it's like if I put milk out to a brownie or whatever, it's like, why? Why is milk popular, for example? All these little bits and pieces. There's accounts as well, but it works the other way. There's all the stories in Somerset, for example, of farmers 100, 200 years ago who never had the time to get all their grain thrashed away. So he gets up in the night, he goes into the barn, and the fairies are actually sorting out all the corn for them. We don't have experiences of that level of drama nowadays, or that level of intensity. The best we have are pancakes. Pancakes are cool, but it's it was much more visceral in the past, much more physical and strong. But then maybe the world has moved away. But maybe now we're turning the corner, moving back towards them again.
Yeah, we did definitely take a different path, didn't we? So yeah, I do hope that we are leading back to ourselves again. It feels like we kind of lost ourselves.
You must have come across accounts. You must have come across accounts of the Fae leaving, the fairies leaving, and there's stories of fairies, troops of fairies. We're going from this world now. And there's those accounts. And again, it seems maybe it's going the other way now, and they're actually starting to come back. Because the encounters are stronger than ever, and the human interest is stronger than ever. With Marjorie Johnson's book, with being republished, with with your group, all the things which are happening are actually bringing them back into focus again. And it's like, if you go back, say, 30 years, it's like, oh, I saw a fairy. That's almost embarrassing. Now, actually, it's acceptable. It's just fine. It's just what happens. It's part of the experiences we have. And it's not cloaked in UFOs. It's not cloaked in, these are my grandparents' stories. These are cloaked in, this is my experience.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it, I think, very valuable.
Yeah, I mean, Marjorie Johnson was so inspiring. And I think, I guess that is sort of the line I'm hoping to take with the Modern Fairy Sightings project, is just to, as she did, just collect these stories and people a space to talk about them, and then allow other people to hear them, and in her case read them. Those accounts are so precious, and it is. It's interesting, as you say. I think it's not about sort of the investigating and needing to get answers and all of those, it's just about, let's kind of see what this leads to. Let's see what we can learn from this.
It's the world, it's not, if we want to investigate it, there's that dominance to it. We don't need to do that.
Yeah.
We just need to explore it and see what happens, and Simon Young got me into that from Marjorie's book. And again, another person who's doing so much fantastic work. And let's look at the experiences. And how awesome. I mean, we live in a world where fairies exist. I mean, it's preposterous, but it's brilliant at the same time,
It's true. Thank you very much, Paolo. Let us know what you're doing in London when you get there and settled.
Oh, I will. And if people contact me, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm fairly approachable. There'll be projects happening, getting busier as I sort of get past the move and get sorted.
Yeah.
And it'll be fairy, ghost, UFO related, and there's stuff I want to do. So
yeah. And it's Secret Lines of London.
Secret Lines of London. I think you've got the links. If not, I'll send them with this show notes and so on.
Yeah, I'll put the links up, and so that's the best way to contact you, through Facebook.
But Facebook's the best. I mean, I'm on Twitter as well, but Facebook is where I am most of the time when my boss is not looking. So yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you very much, and see you soon.
Great discussion. Too.
Time to
Big thanks to Paolo for a really interesting chat. I do hear about angry fairies from time to time, and it got me thinking about the ways in which we can unknowingly disturb their homes. I know of a family who removed a load of grasses from their garden recently, and some weeks later their young child was playing in the garden near that spot when something caught their attention, and they suddenly stopped playing. They said, "There's a monster over there watching me. He's got green eyes and a black tummy." The child was looking directly at the spot where they'd removed the grasses. The family told me they did wonder if they'd upset an otherworldly resident, possibly a gnome, in some way, though they hadn't been aware of his presence previously. They have attempted to make amends by giving him their first homemade elderflower drink of the year, and I've suggested they offer some homemade cake the next time they make one. But most important of all, I've advised that the grown-ups meditate in the garden when they can and see if they can feel into the energy of that place. Here's another encounter with an angry fairy. Again, sounds like a hobgoblin, a brownie, or a gnome. From one of my favourite books, Seeing Fairies by Marjorie T. Johnson. After the death of her husband, Mrs. Oliver went to live in a very beautiful house in Cornwall, which was not expensive because it was reputed to be haunted. She was alone, with no electricity in the house, and one night when she needed another log for her fire, she went from the library without a lamp and passed through the kitchen to the wash-house where the logs were kept. "I got down on my knees on the tiled floor," she said, "and reached under the wash-tub to dislodge a log, when I heard a noise like a scolding squirrel. Chit-chat, chit-chat. And there, on top of the logs and surrounded by a green light, stood a furious little man who looked like an artichoke, but was only as big as my thumb. His face was ugly and frog-like, and he was shaking his fists at me, ordering me off his property. I grabbed a log and tore back to my fire, which I banked with coal. I was terrified." After this incident, Mrs. Oliver met the owner of the property and a previous tenant, both of whom told her that there were pixies in the house, and they laughed when she told them about the little man who'd been so angry and rude to her. A few weeks later, when the weather turned very cold, Mrs. Oliver left that house and went to France, never to return to Cornwall. Now this is interesting because the scolding squirrel sound, the chit-chat chit-chat, is comparable to what Paolo described of his own otherworldly resident. She had got down on her knees onto the tiled floor and reached under the wash-tub to dislodge a log, so she's disturbing the ground, she's disturbing the floor, in the same way Paolo was disturbing the floor in his home. So I do wonder if there's some kind of access point on the ground, a previously undisturbed space. And we can see now how similar these sorts of experiences are to spirit and ghost encounters. Now, one of the other very interesting experiences that Paolo mentioned was with some sort of being who appeared to have taken the form of a member of his family. A similar story was told by our guest from episode 36, Rescued by an Orb and Other Strange Stories, in the exclusive bonus episode on Patreon. In that case, she saw a malevolent being stood at the end of her bed that looked like her husband, but was in a trance. However, her husband was in fact asleep in bed beside her. Now, the appearance of a fetch, as they are known in Irish folklore, is said to indicate the forthcoming death of the person whose likeness appears, but that was not the case in either of these experiences. Icy Sedgwick of the fabulous Folklore podcast has written an interesting article on fetches, which I'll link in the show notes. And let's hear now what Catherine Briggs has to say about fetches. And this is from her Encyclopedia of Fairies. Fetch, a name common all over England for a double or co-walker, very similar to the North Country waff. When seen at night, it is said to be a death portent, and is at all times ominous. Aubrey, in his Miscellanies, records that the beautiful Lady Diana Rich, daughter of the Earl of Holland, as she was walking in her father's garden at Kensington to take the fresh air before dinner, about 11 o'clock, being then very well, met with her own apparition, habit and everything, as in a looking-glass. About a month after, she died of the smallpox, and it is said that her sister, the Lady Isabella Tyne, saw the like of herself also before she died. This account I had from a person of honour. So we'll have a look at co-walkers. Kirk, in his secret commonwealth, names a double, such as the Germans call a doppelganger, a co-walker. In the north it is called a waff, and is said to be a death token. Kirk, however, considers it to be one of the fairies, and says, "They are clearly seen by these men of the second sight to eat at funerals and banquets. Hence many of the Scottish Irish will not taste meat at these meetings, lest they have communion with or be poisoned by them. So are they seen to carry the bier or coffin, with the corpse among the middlemen, to the grave. Some men of that exalted sight, whether by art or nature, have told me that they have seen at these meetings a double man, or the shape of some man in two places, that is, a superterranean and a subterranean inhabitant, perfectly resembling one another in all points, whom he notwithstanding could easily distinguish one from another by some secret tokens and operations, and so go to speak to the man, his neighbour and familiar, passing by the apparition or resemblance of him. They call this reflex man a co-walker, every way like the man as a twin brother and companion, haunting him as his shadow, as is oft seen and known among men, resembling the original, both before and after the original is dead, and was also often seen of old to enter a house by which the people knew that the person of that likeness was to visit them within a few days. This copy, echo, or living picture goes at last to his own herd." And finally, the waff, which is what they are called in the north of England. Waff, the Yorkshire name for a wraith or double. In other words, it is a kind of co-walker. It is believed to be a death token, and may be seen either by the doomed man or by a friend. William Henderson gives several instances in folklore of the northern counties. If a man sees his own waff, he can avert his fate by speaking to it severely. Henderson gives an example of a native of Guisborough, who, on going into a shop at Whitby, saw his own waff. He addressed it boldly. "What's thou doing here? What's thou doing here? Thou's after no good. I'll go bail. Get thy ways yom with thee, get thy ways yom." The waff slunk off, quite ashamed of itself, and he had no further trouble with it. So here we have 3 entries. The waff and the fetch are both thought to have been these portents of doom and death. In the first one, the lady meets her end. In the third one, the man is able to fend the waff off and give it a bit of a scolding. But in the co-walker entry, the Reverend Robert Kirk, who wrote The Secret Commonwealth of Elves, Fauns and Fairies, he considered co-walkers or reflex man to be a type of fairy being, although he does speak of them attending funerals. The idea that these double men are both a superterranean, above ground person and a subterranean, an underground inhabitant, perfectly resembling one another. So these two people that look the same from different worlds, are they connected by that person? Or is it something else? Is the subterranean being using some kind of illusion trick to look like the superterranean person? He says that the co-walker haunts the man as his shadow. He's often seen resembling the man of this world, both before and after the original is dead. So he is tying it into death also, but it's interesting that he considers these beings to be fairies. Perhaps they were tying them into spirits because apparitions we usually associate with departed souls. But in this case they seem to be something else, we're not sure what. So I'd love to hear from any listeners who've heard accounts of these beings or experienced it themselves, whether they are some kind of shadow being fairies who possess the ability to shape-shift into the likeness of people we don't yet know, but first-hand accounts help to form a picture. This episode provides a lot of further avenues to think about and explore. I'm thinking about the ways in which fairy beings may be living in our homes and gardens too. Thank you very much for listening to the end, and if you've enjoyed this, please rate and subscribe and consider sharing with a friend. If you can support the show, there's bonus content and a community on Patreon for £3 a month, and I'm also on Buy Me a Coffee. If these encounters are indeed much more common than we currently realize, what was our relationship with these beings in the distant past? In ancient Greek literature, the world was full of spirits of nature, bad and good, and we treated them with respect. It feels important to look to the earliest writings in order to make some ground in understanding what many of us are experiencing now. I thank you for continuing this journey with me, and together, in ever-increasing numbers, we remain curious.